Now, before you think of me as some sort of monster in trying to create anxiety in 9-year-old children, let me tell you where we are headed with this particular paradigm. We want to flip it on its head. So if in fact there is a causal link between this very early aspect of attention, orienting to threat, and we now, at least I hope you now know something about the underlying neural circuitry that's associated with this initial orienting to threat, then if we can train anxious children away from threat, then perhaps in combination with more traditional approaches, therapeutic approaches and intervention approaches to reduce anxiety in children, we can in fact show reduced symptoms of anxiety in those who are trained away from threatening stimuli. In other words, if we redirect, if you will, their attention away from threat. Now, we don't know whether that's going to work. We also are trying to see whether or not, instead of redirecting them away from threat, if we train them towards positive stimuli, whether or not that's in fact more effective. And in fact, if you remember back to that graph that I showed you, the low behaviorally inhibited kids actually had an attention bias to happy faces compared to the behaviorally inhibited kids. So it may in fact be that an attention bias towards positive aspects in the environment may in fact be a protective mechanism and may in fact ameliorate or be suggestive of a reduction in stress arousal in our subjects. We don't know. We're just starting that research right now. But I would say that for those of you who are interested in that, there's just a special issue in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, I believe it was, that McLeod edited, in which there are a half a dozen training studies in which, and these are all with adults, in which they either trained adults with different types of anxiety disorders away from threat or towards positive stimuli, and showed, in fact, reductions in anxiety symptoms as a function of that training. So we think, let me leave you with our hope and a summary slide. We think that we have identified both the underlying neural circuitry that may discriminate and the underlying cognitive processes that may discriminate between behavioral inhibition and disorder. And we also think that with these particular kinds of approaches, we could modify that neural circuitry and that behavior towards the betterment of these children and a reduction in these anxiety symptoms. So with that, I will thank my collaborators, who are many, and who have done all of the hard work here, including the current members of my lab, who have all been responsible for all of the hard work and allowing me to be up here to talk to you. And I thank, obviously, my funders who have given me the funds over the years to do this longitudinal study, and I thank you for your attention. So, questions? No questions? Yeah, Kathy.
I'm thinking about this task where you train in a threat bias. I'm trying to understand what's really going on there. And one thing I'm wondering about is, so you're interpreting it as they're attending to threat. I'm wondering whether participating in this task has any sort of mood induction type effects. And seeing, if I'm understanding right, you're seeing repeatedly over and over either angry phrases or
We're seeing both, actually, right? So they're paired. The way the dot probe works, right, is you see both an angry face and a neutral face at the same time, right? So if you look up, whoops, can we get the image back up? Thanks. So if you look up there, you're seeing a pair of faces.
Right.
But it's an implicit training. The subject doesn't know that they're being trained for an attention bias to threat, or that we're measuring their attention bias. Their task, so they're told, is to simply press the button if the target's on the right or the target's on the left. All right? We superimpose for 500 milliseconds this pair of faces between the cue and the target. So in the training and also in the measurement of the bias, it's an implicit measurement. The subject, for all they know, unless they can guess after seeing 288 trials of the cue and target and the angry face and the target being congruent, that something's fishy going on, the subject is not told that they're being trained threat. That said, you may get changes in mood as a function of the training. Right. Yeah. John?
Is there a quantitative relationship between the intensity of the anxiety that they experience at the end and the extent of the effect of training that they're angry?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, it depends. There are a couple of studies that McLeod has published in which he shows a correlation between the magnitude of self-reported anxiety and the magnitude of the bias that's induced. But that varies across study. So it's not a consistent effect to find that kind of correlation. But at least in 2 studies that McLeod has published, there is a positive correlation between the two.